Welcome back to the beginning prior to my awakening. I'm your host, Mental Stimulant, the Divine Empress. Sit back and relax and listen to my voice. This is Installment 6. I want to start by saying my teens were filled with obstacles I didn't quite understand, both ups and downs, I guess. A quest to understand what happens next, trying to figure out where I belong, with little to no guidance, I might add. A very young, green, and trusting soul. And not until now did I understand what I was really up against as a child. The unit of my home looked normal from the outside by the community, but it was very toxic, yet functioning. My mom was present at this point, and her chosen husband. For many years, I was led to believe that her husband was my biological father, and I treated him like such. But the energy around he and I's interaction always felt imbalanced. But as a child, mentally, you're not equipped to understand those emotions. You just know when something isn't right. I can recall when I was around my grandmother, and I referred to as my mom's husband, as dad. She would get enraged, saying that that is not your father, stop calling him that. And again, I didn't understand. Why was she saying such mean things? More than that, why did it anger her so much? When I took what was being said to my mom and her husband in unison, they said, how does she know when we was humping? She doesn't know. So as a child, this not only confused me, but put me in a hard position of mental conflict. Because whenever I was around my grandmother, I had to be sure to not refer to him as dad, as to not upset her. Then when I was home, I had to be sure not to call him by his name. Rather, I don't believe I have to explain the emotional trauma a child can endure being in the middle of adult nonsense. At this time, my brother was gone, but came around periodically, so discussing this with him always seemed to be the wrong time. After all, he was a young adult, out on his own at only 17, so you can imagine why there was never a good time. I viewed him as brave, but going through a lot on his own. At times I wished to give him what my mom didn't, but I was just a child myself. He was my big brother after all, but I still desired to save him. At the age of only 14, what really could I give him? I had no job, no income of my own. I had no roof I could put over his head, but that didn't stop me from trying. When my brother would come around my mom's townhouse she acquired via Section 8, I would bargain with the adult neighbors in my neighborhood with offers of doing favors for them in exchange for a few dollars in hand then and there. Not to go to the store to get candy and such, but to give to my big brother. I worried all the time about him, but I couldn't do much for him. With limited resources, I wanted to protect him however I could. You would have thought he'd ask me where I got the money from, but he never did. I only ever thought about that just now, because had it been my little sister, I would have asked, especially with all the perverts in the world. Not that I'm judging him because he was very young himself. At this time, my mom had a toddler, a boy, my little brother, a total pain in my behind. And my mom was also about 7 to 8 months pregnant with my sister finally. I had waited forever for a little sister. I had been downright adamant about my mom bringing home a sister when she decidedly brought home my brother. And honestly, I was furious. I didn't want a brother. I had a brother already. And I felt I just couldn't be close to a boy like I wanted to be. So, anyway, my sister was soon to be here. I was over the moon. I couldn't wait. I waited a long time for her, and she was almost here. One afternoon, my mom, big as a house, was doing laundry, and every time I walked past my mom, I would rub and talk to my sister. I was building a bond. I wanted her to know me before she got here. On this day, there was a knock on the door. As I scooted past my mom in the hallway, when I opened the door, there stood two men in suits, both with chains and badges around their necks. I thought nothing of it. I yelled, "Mom, the door." I stepped off to the side and continued whatever I was doing, both ears wide open. I was a kid after all. Kids are nosy. I heard the shock in my mom's voice as she asked, "Please, can you come back in the morning? My children are home. No one's here to stay with them." They actually agreed. I can't believe that even happened at work. Where do they do that at? I sit here and think about that all the time. But it had to have been the huge belly and the toddler running around. I kinda knew what was going on, but not 100% sure. I asked my mom, could I stay home? Because I knew the men were coming back for her. I wanted to be there to see what was going to happen. But she said, no, you're going to school. I went to school and spent the entire day watching the clock. I was anxious to get home to see if my mom was back. I rushed home and instantly walking in the house, I felt the energy. My mom was not there. I smelled no aroma of coffee, which was her norm. I instantly felt an instant sinking feeling in my chest. Her husband gathered my brother and I into the car and took us to his sister's house. There we awaited a call from my mom. Finally it came and all she wanted was to talk to me. I didn't understand what was going on and she didn't tell me either. She just gave specific instructions. She told me stay at the house, not at her husband's sister's house, to look after my brother and be sure to tell her if her husband had anyone in her house. And of course, that she loved me. Then I was told to give her husband the phone. She never even told me when she would return home. Those instructions shortly went out the window because now I was bucking the system. I was 14 after all. My eyes hadn't even been open to the opposite sex yet. But oh, the eyes of my peers were open, and they knew exactly where all the boys were. Over a short period of time, I began hooking school, sneaking out of the house in the wee hours of the morning. Me and my few friends could be found wandering the streets in the AM. On one specific occasion, we were on the streets and an old school vehicle pulled up to the curb. A dude sat behind the wheel, much older, wearing a Kango hat, gold chain around his neck. He called us over and we approached and leaned into the passenger side window. He asked us, "Where y'all going? Y'all trying to go party?" he asked. In hand, he had several Ziploc bags with substances in them, pills, a white powder, and some other things that I couldn't identify. But the energy in that moment told me to move. I grabbed my friend's arms and said, "Let's go," because I was shown where this moment was going, even though I didn't even understand until I became an adult. My mom's absence made me rebellious, kind of out of control, although I was nowhere near what I could have been. In those times, I promise you, the Most High was with me. Even when I was unawakened, my intuition was on point. At this point in my life, I am officially awakened and fully prepared. I view my past with such a different perspective. At this moment, I have a few thought provoking things I would like to say and ask that you spend time meditating on them. Always understand that change is inevitable. Your life was set in stone even before your conception. The only difference is your free will. We will always be given choices. The choices we make can either affect our path positively or negatively. This is why it's important to look at things with a different perspective. Never judge a book by its cover. The jewel can only be found in the content inside. And what is for you may not be for me. Never envy someone else's path, only seek your own. Yours has been constructed just for you. If you feel like you like to talk to someone, to vent, or gain a different perspective, feel free to reach out. The information is in the description. Healing is here, and the Most High is in control. Love and light. Take care.